So hello everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar about ISO 27001 implementation. So let's wait maybe 30 seconds more for everyone to join. And while we are waiting, I'm just curious, where are you joining from? So I'm calling in from Zagreb, from Croatia. How about you? Let me know through a chat message just to see how far this webinar can be heard. And yeah, while we are waiting for your answers, just a couple of notes. First of all, we are recording this webinar, and you'll be able to watch the recording, and I'll tell you actually how to do it at the end of the webinar. And second thing is, you'll be able also to download the presentation deck from this webinar, and also after the at the end of the webinar, I'll tell you where can you download the PDF presentation deck from this webinar today. Okay, very well. Yeah, I think we can start. So, welcome to the webinar ISO 27001, an overview of the ISMS implementation process. My name is 𝗹𝗲𝗴𝗏, and I'm the main ISO 27001 expert at 𝗹𝗲𝗶𝘀, a company that makes ISO 27001 easy to understand and simple to use. This webinar today is streamed through Zoom, but also through LinkedIn live events and through YouTube live. And it will last approximately 50 to 60 minutes, depending on the number of questions you will have. And I'll make this webinar as interactive as possible, so please do ask as many questions as you want, and it will make the webinar more interesting and more useful for you, and it's actually easier for me to answer questions rather than just speak something theoretical. So feel free to send your questions. You can do this during my webinar. You do not have to wait for the Q&A session. But of course, at the end of the webinar, we'll have this Q&A session where you can also ask questions at the end. Okay, very well. Now let's move on to the next slide. Very often I see companies, when they go for this ISO 27001 implementation, they think, this is only a bunch of documents that they have to fill out, and and think that they will be done with it, but this is not really true. So basically it's it's something that is much more than writing documents. It's really more about basically setting up security processes and roles and responsibilities so that everything works correctly in your company. And this is exactly what I'll present in the webinar today. So how to prepare and what are the key steps in ISO 27001 compliance implementation project. Good. So basically this webinar today is intended for people who are implementing ISO 27001 for the first time. So if you don't have any experience with this standard, if you never actually implemented any of these kind of cybersecurity frameworks, then this webinar is for you. On the other hand, if you are already, let's say, experienced consultant, then you might take a look at some of my other webinars, which go into more depth with certain topics around 27001. Good. Yeah, so one of my main points today is really that this ISO 27001 doesn't have to be only, I would say, a writing basically a project where you write documents, just a compliance or bureaucratic job. Actually, if you do this properly, you will achieve, I would say, at least two things. First of all, raise the level of security in your company, and also achieve some business benefit for the company, meaning that you'll raise revenues for your company. So this is important. So the point is that 27001 is important not only from the security point of view, but also from the business point of view, because it will help your business grow. And this is exactly what what makes this actually standard very useful, because it's not security only. It's not technically only oriented. It's also business oriented. And of course, I'll explain these things during the webinar today. Good. So let's move on to the agenda. And by the way, as I'll go through the agenda, let me know which of these topics you find the most interesting. So if you see anything that you would like me to focus on, let me know through the chat window. and then I'll know that I have to spend more time at this topic during the webinar. So simply send me a message to know what you want me to focus on. Okay, so first I'll go through this ISO 27000 family of standards, or ISO 27000 series of standards. Well, what are the standards in this series and what can you actually use them for? And then I'll go through these 16 steps that you have to take to go through the to actually achieve that you are ready for certification. Then I'll actually go through the question of how long does it take for you to become compliant. So something that you know, it's usually a question, you know, how much time do we need to spend? So I'll answer these kind of questions. Also, how much does it cost? What kind of costs you need to take into account? There are basically 4 types of costs that I will show you there. Also, how to approach the implementation. Basically, there are 3 approaches, you know, 3 options on actually how you can approach the implementation. I'll explain this as well. And I'll also go through some biggest challenges in implementation. And of course, at the end, I'll go through the Q&A as well. Okay, so basically this is the agenda. So let's move on with this first topic, and this is around this ISO 27000 family of standards. By the way, do you perhaps know how many standards are there in this series? Actually, there are more than 40, maybe even more than 50 now. I'm not sure myself. So anyway, a huge number of standards. But don't worry, basically, if you're a beginner, you need to use only one standard, and this is this ISO 27001. So ISO 27001 is basically a standard which describes, you know, it gives you a framework on how to manage security in a company, how to build this information security management system, which is basically, I would say, a way for you to organize security in your company. Now, when you take a look at the main elements of this ISMS information security management system, one of the key elements here is to assess the risks. In other words, to find out what bad can happen to your digital data, to your information in your company. And this is called risk assessment, and then figure out how to treat those risks. So altogether, this risk assessment and treatment is risk management, and this is the first, I would say, key part that you have to deal with as part of ISO 27001. And then the second part is, once you realize how are you going to treat the risks, is for you to decide which kind of controls or safeguards you need to implement as part of this ISMS information security management system. So ISO 27001 offers you a catalog of 93 controls, and I'll come to this later on in the presentation. I'll give you, you know, the list of these controls and basically some guidelines on how to implement them. But this is basically not all. The third, I would say, main part is really that you measure on how you're doing, how your security is doing. And this is done, you know, I would say a couple of ways. First of all is to set some expectations on what you want from security. In other words, to set some objectives, and then to measure on how you're doing when it comes to security, because otherwise, you know, you wouldn't really know how far you got and did you really achieve what you expected in the first place. Anyway, so these are, I would say, 3 main components of ISO 27001. Of course, they're not all, but I'm trying to kind of simplify things here. And if you want actually to dig deeper and learn more about these other elements, then you can go and read these other standards, 27005 for risk management, 27002, which gives you a suggestion on how to implement these controls, and 27004, which provides you more details about setting objectives, measurement, and so on. However, if you are, you know, doing this for the first time, and if you're doing this only for your company, then, you know, you should focus only on 27001. If you want to do this for a living, like if you want to become a CISO or, I don't know, a consultant, then yes, then you should you know, purchase these other standards and to learn more about this topic. But again, if you have a company and you want to focus only ISO 27000 implementation, reading 27001 is enough. You don't need any other standards. Good. Now let's move on to these 16 steps. So basically, what is it exactly that you have to do to become compliant with the standards? Basically, what are the steps in your project, right? So the first step is really to get the support from your senior management. Why? Because it's not like you can organize this alone, only with let's say some senior with some let's say mid-level management, or even without any management support, basically because you will need money, you will need human resources, meaning you will need some people with their time to make this project work. So if you do not have these things, then you should not try really to implement ISO 27001, because this will end as a failure. And typically getting this support means that you will get some money from the budget, also that you will have enough people dedicated to your project. Later on, I can also suggest you some, let's say, how much effort is needed really for particular people in the company. Then the next step is to establish the project. So it's unfortunately this standard is complex enough that you cannot do this just out of your, let's say, head. So it needs to really be organized as a project. So you need a project manager, you need a clear project plan, you need a project sponsor. So for someone from the senior management who will actually help you once you get stuck, and unfortunately you will get stuck during this project. You might also have a project team, especially if you are a mid-size or a larger company. Project team is typically not needed for smaller companies. So you need a project plan which will define all of these things. And then the next step is really to define this, to identify interested parties and their requirements. Now, what is this? Basically, this comes down to identifying what other, let's say, external parties want from you, from your security, because you actually want your implementation to cover all of these requirements. And there are typically two sources of these requirements. One are basically the legislation, right? So you have governments with laws and regulations, various government agencies that publish also their regulations. So for example, in Europe, if you're operating in Europe, there is this GDPR, which realistically applies to every company that operates in Europe, because basically almost every company processes personal data, and GDPR also requires you to implement some security measures as part of protection of personal data. So GDPR is typically, if you're operating in Europe, one of the legislation, one of the laws that actually apply to your company. So this is from, let's say, the government side, from the legislation side. But the second most important source of these requirements are your clients. Because if you are operating in the, let's say, business-to-business world, then you have your customers, clients with whom you are signing agreements. And in these agreements, you typically have various security clauses where they actually require you to implement certain security things. So for example, let's say that you are a software development company where you develop software for, I don't know, a bank. And in this case, you might have, the bank actually then might say, okay, you need to use a certain type of encryption, you need to use, I don't know, VPNs to connect to a network, you need to do this and that. So basically all these kind of security requirements, then you also need to collect and make sure that you're aware of them and that you actually comply with them as you move on with your project. Why is this important so early in the project? Because you need to be aware of these external requirements early on so that you can incorporate them in, let's say, the right spots during the implementation of your project. Now, we'll share with you a question from, we'll share with you a link which for an article called How to Identify ISMS Requirements of Interested Parties in ISO 27001. And you will see the link to this article in a couple of seconds in the chat window. Now, just to explain this, so if you joined the webinar through Zoom or through YouTube, then you can simply click this link and this article will open. However, if you joined the webinar through LinkedIn, unfortunately, LinkedIn, because of some limitations, doesn't allow actually these links to be clickable. So the workaround here is simply for you to copy the link and then open your browser and paste it in your browser, and the link will open. Normally you will see this article. Anyway, so you can see this article, this link for this article in the chat now. And we'll also share with you another link for article is called ISO 27001 Implementation Guide. This implementation guide basically explains all of these 16 steps in even more detail, and you will find also some other useful information there, you know, about the timing and the costs involved, about the resources needed, you know, how much should each member of the team actually spend, how much time should he or she spend, and so on. So if you open this second article that you see now in the chat window, you will see all of this useful information as well. Good. Now let's go for this next step. So the fourth step is really to define the scope of the implementation, because ISO 27001 allows you to implement the standard in your whole company or only in your part of the company. Now, not to go into too much details about this, basically if you are a company above 50 employees, so 50 above this, then you might consider that you are implementing the standard only in part of your company. But if you are below 50 employees, typically you will go for your whole company, because it's faster, easier, rather than trying to, you know, split the scope into even smaller scope when you're already a small company. In any case, you'll see now a link to an article called All You Need to Know About Setting the ISO 27001 Scope. So you can find more information there. Okay, the next step is to define this risk process. Basically, you need to define the rules on how you will perform risk assessment and treatment before you actually start doing it. Because on one hand, probably no one in your company knows how this needs to be done. So you actually have to explain how this needs to be done. And second, you need to have the same criteria on how people are assessing the risks. Otherwise, you'll have very different results, and you know, it's not going to be helpful for anyone. And this is where you basically create this risk assessment methodology. And then the next step is to perform risk assessment and treatment itself. This means that you have to list all of your assets and threats and vulnerabilities, and then assess, you know, the level of impact, likelihood, you know, determine which controls you need, and so on. And for that purpose, you can take a look at another article. It's called ISO 27001 Risk Assessment, Treatment and Management, the Complete Guide. So quite a detailed article, which gives you, I would say, you know, all the inputs that you need for complying with this, for executing these two steps. Okay, now next step is basically defining which controls you want to implement. So after you finish your risk assessment and treatment, then you have to write this statement of applicability. And basically, statement of applicability is a list of all the 93 controls from this Annex A. And for each of these controls, you have to say whether it's applicable for your business or not. And also, you should define how you want to implement it. So you write, you know, which kind of policies, procedures, or I don't know, some technology you will use to implement it. And you also define why, the justification. So basically, why did you decide to apply some controls, or why did you decide to not to apply some controls? So all of these things will be actually part of this document called Statement of Applicability. And when you look at it, it's a kind of a security profile of your company, because you have everything in one document, and it becomes very transparent on exactly what your company wants to do with security. Now, this document is crucial because not only because 27001 requires it, but also because the certification auditors will be using this document as the main document during the audit, because it gives them, you know, direct pointers on what your company does when it comes to security. So very important document. Also, you'll see now a link to an article which describes more about this statement of applicability. Okay, the next step is that you define who will implement the controls, what are the deadlines, and so on. So this is a kind of an implementation plan, because it defines clear responsibilities for the implementation. But in 27001 it's called the risk treatment plan. Also a mandatory document, something you have to do, and so this is done after the statement of applicability. And then the next step is that you start figuring out how you're going to measure, for each and every control that you're implementing, and for your overall ISMS to start, measuring, how it performs. So you can, use measurement methodology or something like this. But basically, again, it comes down to defining what are the objectives and then measuring against these objectives. And we'll also send you now the link to this article, how to perform monitoring and measurement in ISO 27001. Good. Now, the next step is to, of course, implement all the controls. Not all 93, but the controls that you found applicable in the statement of applicability. And for that purpose, you will typically write various policies, procedures. For example, for, let's say, control related to access control, you will write access control policy. Okay, for the backup, you might write a separate backup policy, or you might simply specify that you will be using a certain technology for implementing the backup. So the standard doesn't require you to write the backup policy. So you can simply, in the statement of applicability, say that instead of writing a backup policy, you simply are using, I don't know, a certain technology for doing the backup, and basically this is it. So basically, depending on the size of your company, the smaller your company is, you will go for fewer documents, and the larger your company is, you will have more documents. Now, I'll show you one useful resource, a free resource on 𝗹𝗲𝗿𝗲 website, which will give you an idea on basically how the standard is structured, and also what are all the controls that you have in the standard. So it's called Big Guide to ISO 27000 Clauses. How is this standard structured? And when you scroll down, you will see, non-mandatory clauses in 27001, and then mandatory clauses in 27001. And let's say that you want to see, I don't know, clause 4.3, how you determine the scope of the ISMS. And then here you see a basic explanation of what this clause requires, what is the typical documentation that you would need, what are the implementation steps for that, and also what is the audit evidence, right? Anyway, going back to this main page, let's see how these controls look like. So here you actually have a list of all the 93 controls. And so let's pick one, let's say access rights. And here you have the same thing. So basically it explains what the this control requires, with what is the typical documentation that you would need, access control policy, how you would need to actually implement this, and then what kind of evidence is needed basically for this kind of control. Anyway, we'll send you now the link to this big guide, and feel free to use it for your implementation project as a source for everything that you're doing. Good. Now, next step is to perform this training and awareness. And, I mean, it's not really a step that comes afterwards, implementing controls. It's really in parallel to implementing these controls. And why is this needed? Because let's say that you are implementing, I don't know, a new backup system, right? You're starting to do a backup in a different way. If your employees do not know how to use this backup, then, well, obviously they won't do it, right? So you need to train them on how to use the new backup system, whatever it is. But you also have to make them aware of why backup is needed in the first place, because, you know, some people might object and say, why would I need to do this? You know, it's not really something that I do. I'm not an IT person. Why would I need to do backup on my computer? So you have to make them aware of why security is important, and this is something that So this is why that in parallel to the implementation of your controls, you have to do this implementation, you have to do this training and awareness programs. We'll also share now the link to this article, how to perform training and awareness for ISO 27001. Good, and then you have to start operating your ISMS. Operating the ISMS meaning that you are actually starting to do whatever you defined in your policies and procedures. So let's say that, I don't know, in your backup policy, if you decide to write it, you said that you're going to do the backup, I don't know, every 12 hours for a particular system. Well, operating the ISMS means that you are really doing the backup every 12 hours for that particular system. And, you know, this goes then for each and every policy or procedure or rule that you have defined. You actually have to start complying with all of these things. This means operating the ISMS. And of course, as you do these things, you will create records. For example, this backup system will create some backup logs, which will then be a proof that you actually are operating your ISMS. Right, now let's move on to the next slide. And this is really about monitoring. So you'll have to monitor all the things that are happening in your ISMS and really see if these are kind of aligning with what you are expecting. And then you have to perform also this internal audit. Internal audit basically means that someone who is, let's say, independent within your company reviews everything that is being done, and then to find out if really everyone is complying. Because, you know, you might have this backup policy which says that you have to do the backup every 12 hours, but, you know, some IT or some other people from your company might do this every 2 days, right? So someone has to find out that something is going wrong. And this basically, this is internal audit. So internal audit has to be performed. This is something that is mandatory. It must be performed before the certification audit, and then it needs to be performed regularly after the certification audit, at least once a year. And yeah, for more information, we'll send you now this link for this article, ISO 27000 Internal Audit, the complete guide. And then the next step is to perform this management review. Management review is basically a meeting of your senior management where they have to take into account all the important information about your ISMS, including, of course, the internal audit report, all the corrective actions that are needed, including, of course, the results of these measurements and so on. And then, based on all of this information, then the senior management needs to decide several things about your ISMS, you know, how to improve it, I don't know, which new documents need to be written, let's say what budget is needed for security, and so on and so forth. So all of these things are needed, and this is something that this is something that is done as part of a management review. And then finally, the final step is really to do these improvements, and mainly these improvements are done through corrective actions. So this is something that is needed because corrective actions are, I would say, a systematic way of fixing things in your company. So if you have a non-conformity, if you have a problem that you found during the internal audit, then this corrective action is I would say, a systematic and also documented way to fix the problem. So basically these are the 16 steps. So you cannot go really for the certification audit unless you really have gone through all of these 16 steps. You really need to go through all of them. Once you've done all of these steps, then you can actually invite the auditor to start with this certification audit. Okay, now if you're feeling overwhelmed with all of these steps, with all of these things that you have to do, I'll show you now a product which is called 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and basically this is our product that helps smaller companies become compliant with ISO 27001. So basically it gives you all the steps that you have to go through throughout your implementation, And then, as you can see here, you have these steps. You have the 4 phases, so project preparation, and then risk management and security documentation, and then finally this preparation for the external audit. There is also this phase of maintenance, which actually comes after the certification audit. And then as part of each step, you create some documents. You also do the risk management. So for example, here, one of the steps is ISMS scope document. And it already gives you all the templates. So basically you go through the templates and adapt these templates for your specific needs. And here you have this wizard, and basically, it, as you go through this wizard and write anything, you can see also that this exactly text also appears in the document itself. So it's very quick actually to fill out all the documents that are needed in this way. Once you come to the towards the end of the your implementation project, you also have this audit and evidence module, and actually it gives you an overview of all the documents that you have written during your project. It gives you actually the indication when you last change it, what are the relevant clauses, and in which status is this. So you can very easily see how far did you go with your documentation and what else you need to do. But also you can map everything that you've done against the clauses of the standard. So for example, let's say for, I don't know, clause 6, you see that this company is, let's say, fully ready because it has done everything that was needed. But let's say when it goes for, I don't know, some of these controls, you see that some of the controls are completed, some of the controls are not. And when you actually go for, I don't know, and click, let's say, any of these details, you'll see everything that was part of it. So for 5.12 classification of information, you get the explanation here. You have the implementation methods, and you see also which documents actually created to cover this particular control. So it's a very good way to map whatever you were doing to these clauses and see exactly if you're ready and what else do you have to do as part of this implementation. So not to spend any more of your time on this, I also wanted to show you another product, and basically this is this, we'll send you now the link for Conformio, so you can take a look and you can actually try it yourself. There is this 14-day free trial. So you'll see that once you click this link, you can sign up for a free trial, and then you can test all of these features yourself. The second product that is very useful is this company training academy, where you actually, this is basically a learning management system with a series of videos which you can use for training and awareness of your employees. And basically it works like this. You go for a setup of new training, and then you select the framework, in this case 27001. It already suggests you the predefined series of videos, the programs for, let's say, I don't know, training awareness for security managers. Let me select this one. Then you click continue. Then you define for which country, which language you want. And then it shows you all the included lessons. So it's for example, it suggests a lesson about remote work. Okay, this one is 4 minutes, the mind of a hacker, 5 minutes, 42, and so on. So it provides you with video lessons that actually teach in a very short way and concise way about all the key aspects of a particular topic. And then not to spend any time further, of course, you can see a preview here, for any of these videos, how they look like. But the point is that after you simply enter the email addresses, and then the system starts sending these emails according to the schedule that you define. Let me just show you how you define this schedule. Okay, these are the videos. So so continue, and then you define the frequency. So let's say attend one lesson per, let's say, week, and you want these lessons to happen, let's say, every Thursday. And so on. And basically then the system automatically starts sending these invitations and tracks who has opened them and so on. So let me go back to the presentation. Yeah, we'll send you also now this link for this ISO 27001 training and awareness so that you can use it. In some, you will see that in some higher packages of Conformio, this training and awareness is already included. So we actually merged these two products into one, depending on which payment tier you go for in Conformio. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And this is, the question, how long does this take? So it really depends mainly on how big your company is. So if you're a company of up to 20 employees, it's probably up to 3 months, especially if you're using a tool like Conformio. If you are 20 to 50, it's somewhere between 3 and 5 months. 50 to 200, it's probably around half a year. And then if you're more than 200 employees, probably closer to a year, maybe even more than a year, if you're a couple of thousand employees. So the bigger the company, the more complex, of course, the implementation is, the more documents you will have, the more people will be involved, and therefore the longer time. Good, yeah, let me see if there are any questions that came in. So I think, let me just check. So Eric was asking, I work for a small foundation in the mental health care. The foundation has no server, but only work. Okay. Servers not only workstations and only uses SaaS applications. I performed risk analysis. I found a number of risks. We also determined the measures. 2 questions. Most of the measures are the responsibility of the SaaS suppliers. For example, backups. What do we have to do? Is it enough to analyze the risk, determine the measures, or do we also have to implement the measures? Okay, so let's say that you're, for example, using, I don't know, Amazon AWS, right? So the cloud provider where you host your virtual server, and that basically you configure the AWS that it needs to perform the backup in a certain schedule. So it is, I mean, in reality, it's the AWS that is doing this backup, but you are the one that has to configure this backup in this case. So this is, let's say, one scenario on how to handle third parties and actually their execution of your security. Now, the second scenario is where you basically outsourced your whole, let's say, IT infrastructure to a third party. Let's say that you have a managed service provider and that they are doing actually everything on your behalf. In this case, you actually have to specify exactly to this managed service provider on how things need to run, because managed service provider does know how to perform the backup, but how does it know how often the backup needs to be done? They can do it, I don't know, continuously, or once every hour, or once every day, or I don't know, once every week. How would they know actually how often you need to do the backup? This is something that you have to define, and this is something you define in the contract between you and this managed service provider, or it's some kind of a specific specification that comes that you actually specify, okay, we want to do this and this and this in this way, and then you send it to them, and this is how they actually perform it. So the ultimate responsibility for security is yours as your company, even though that part of these activities are done by external party. And this is what is important for you to understand. Good. Now let's, I don't think any other questions came in, so let's move on. Okay, how much does this cost? Yeah, there are 4 types of costs that you have to take into account. So first of all are, the cost of acquiring knowledge. And basically, it's acquiring knowledge could be, I don't know, sending your employees for some courses, right? So that they learn about ISO 27001. Sending, I don't know, it might be, I don't know, purchasing some books, these kind of things. And by the way, we'll send you now the link to advisors courses for 27001. So these courses are a separate product from this learning management system that I was showing you. So these courses are intended actually for teaching individuals. So if you want to go through the course, you can do it, and actually it's completely free. So as long as you want to go through the whole course without taking an exam, this is something that you can do. And I would advise that you go for this ISO 27001 Foundations course, even though you will see some other courses there. Okay, the second cost will be a cost of new technology. So you might, I don't know, implement some new backup system. For example, if this is something that you estimated. By the way, the ISO 27001 does not require you to implement any specific technology. It does require you, as I presented, to do the risk assessment, and then if you find some risks that are simply too high, then you need to cover these risks through various activities and technologies. So it might happen that you simply need to go with some new technology because of these risks. Then you will have the cost of the certification body if you decide to go for the certification, because of certification, of course, is not mandatory, but most companies do, because they want to prove to their customers that this is something that they basically comply with the standard. And the certification cost really depends heavily again on the size of the company, and I would say it's the minimum is somewhere around, at least in Europe and North America, the minimum would be somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 euros or dollars for very small companies, and of course it grows as the company grows in terms of number of employees. And we'll share also now with you the link to this ISO 27000 certification cost calculator, so you can use this calculator to estimate the costs of your certification audit. And finally, you will have employees' time, right? So it's something that the idea here is that you will need to have people who will actually work on this project. So first of all, you will have a project manager, but then you will also have the involvement of these other employees. For example, when you start writing new policies and procedures, you will need to send them these drafts to other people in the company who will have to review them and give some improvements. Once you start actually implementing the controls, these people will need to be involved, and so on. So there will be the employees' time. So unfortunately, there is no one cost that you can simply calculate out of your head for ISO 27000 implementation. Rather, you have to use these four various different types of costs for calculating the complete budget. Okay, Marco is asking, is Conformio implementation software only for 27001 or is NIS2 in it also? Conformio is currently only for 27001, and for NIS2 we have a separate product. It's called NIS2 Documentation Toolkit, and we'll send you now the link to this NIS2 Documentation Toolkit. So Conformio is, I would say, a bit more automated because it also includes, the risk register, the statement of applicability. So lots of things are they're automated there because some activities are done more or less automatically. Whereas this documentation toolkit for NIS2, it covers all the documents, but there is no automation there. It's not a GRC tool, right? So you can consider Conformio as I would say, small GRC for small companies, whereas NIS2 toolkit of 𝗲𝗏𝗿𝗲 is only the set of documents. Okay, good. Now let's move on. How to approach the implementation. But basically, there are three ways to do it. First one is that you simply do it with your own employees. And this is a viable and doable thing if you already have a knowledgeable person in your company who has already done this ISO 27001 a couple of times. So if you do have such a person, then you probably should go with this option because you already have the know-how within your company, and this is also the option where you actually with the lowest costs, right? The second option is that you actually hire a consultant, and I would say this is a more traditional way of doing this because then you actually hire someone with the knowledge who basically is guiding you by the hand and telling you exactly what you have to do. Of course, this is also the most expensive option because you have to pay a knowledgeable consultant, because if you don't have knowledgeable one, then you can pay less money, but then you will have a problem. So make sure that if you do go for a consultant, that you hire someone who is very good. Now, the third option is the combination basically of the first two. And basically this means that you actually ask your own employees to implement the standard, but you acquire the know-how from the outside, from let's say some external party. And basically this is what we and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 are focused on. So this is our business model. We, I would say, enable your own employees to implement the standard, and we provide you, all the software, the documentation, everything that you need, all the know-how, all the support, and then your employees can do it, even though that you never done this before. Of course, it's not as expensive as a consultant, but it's also not as quick as a consultant. So consultants are much quicker because they do it, most of the things they do themselves, and therefore they're more quick. So ultimately, the choice between all of these options really depends on in which situation are you in. If you already have a knowledgeable employee, this is the first option. If you are really tight with time and the budget is not an issue, then you should go for a second option, the consultant. If your budget is not really as big, and you want to, let's say, involve your staff in the implementation, then this third option might be the best for you. Okay, a question came in from Javier. For a company of 100 employees in a software development with a fully remote workforce, what would be the ISO 27000 implementation team look like, and how many people in the team? Okay, so basically it's like this. You should definitely, if this is a software development company, obviously you should include one person in the project team from the software development. You might also have the salesperson, you might have someone from the financial team, from the financial side. So you should actually have a project team of, let's say, 3 people. Definitely one from software development, maybe 2 others from the business side of the organization. So I would say that this would be an ideal composition of the team. Why is this important? Because these security rules will not be used only by software developers, it will be also used by the business side of the company, and you want them to be represented when you make all of these decisions on how these things need to be implemented. Okay, question came from James. I have no experience in GRC, but on the path to ISO practitioner, any thoughts? Yes, so for if you want to learn on how to become a practitioner, especially if you want to become a consultant, then you should go for these courses. Typically, consultants go for this ISO 27001 lead implementer course. And it's also available on our website, and we'll send you the link now to this course, even though you can also see this link through this previous, you can see this course from these previous links that we've shared, but anyway, we'll share again this link to this ISO 27000 lead implementer course that you can go through and educate yourself. And by the way, again, it's a free course, but if you want to go for the exam, this is something that we charge for. Right, now let's go for one of the last slides, and this is about biggest challenges. So, by the way, I received many messages from you, saying what are your challenges with 27001, and then I summarized or took some of the most interesting ones. And yeah, let me go through them and give you some tips on how to address them. So, this first one is actually interesting. The challenge is aligning the decentralized nature of blockchain with ISO 27000 structured a risk-based approach to security. Key management and access control can be difficult to implement in such an environment. And this is true. So if a company is really, developing, products based on blockchain, it is true that a blockchain, especially if it is set up in such a transparent way so that basically it's publicly available, that then it's difficult to define, for example, access control. But nevertheless, you should define your standards, for example, for what kind of encryption you're using, right? So basically, it's 27001 doesn't specify which kind of encryption you need to use. But obviously, if you start using blockchain-based products, you need to define which encryption keys, or what type of encryption, what encryption technology you need to use. So this is something that you need to start from, and this will basically make you compliant with 27001, because you did define the standards, internal standards for the type of encryption that will be used. Now, when it comes to access control, obviously, if the blockchain itself is publicly available for everyone to access, then there is no control of access to the blockchain itself. However, your company has some internal system like, okay, email. You're not going to allow everyone to access, the email of all of your employees because you're dealing with blockchain. No, of course, you will have the access control to your internal systems strictly controlled. So in your case, to be compliant with 27001, you have to, focus on those systems that are not publicly available, that are internal. I mean, for example, 𝗹𝗲𝗴𝗲 obviously has a website with hundreds of thousands of visitors. Of course, we are not controlling the access to this website, unless, of course, you pay some for our products, and then you get the login. But access to the web pages themselves, is simply free and accessible to everyone. And of course, this is not something where the access is controlled. So the point is, you always have to define in your internal rules what the access you will control. Okay, next challenge was having the business understand the terminology and nomenclature. It is complex and not intuitive. I agree with you. ISO 27001 is not really something you would read out of pleasure. Definitely not. But in this case, I think it's much better if you go if you want yourself to educate, then you should go through one of these courses, because these courses really explain the whole thing in a much more understandable way. Of course, if you want to train your employees in your company, then sending them all for courses would be probably an overkill. In this case, it's better to go for this kind of a learning management system where you send them some short videos for them to understand, specific pieces of information that they need to know. For example, you will send to, I don't know, your senior management video around, what is the management review, and it's 5-minute video, so it's much easier, to kind of educate your employees for these kind of things. Okay, another challenge: how to get operations to work in order to be ISO 27000 compliant without extra effort on their side. Now, I like this extra effort here. So it's like this. Okay, let's focus first on the first part of the sentence. How to get operations to work in order to be ISO 27000 compliant? Well, basically it's easy. Whatever you have written in your policies and procedures, you have to comply with. If you have written in your backup policy that you will do the backup every, 12 hours, well, then do it every 12 hours. And now actually comes a catch. Now, if your risks are showing that you can actually do backup every 24 hours, if there is no requirement or risk that would force you to do it more often, why would you actually write a policy to do it more often? And actually there is the answer to this challenge. Very often companies are introducing some security rules which make no sense, okay, which are too strict when they look at the risks. So don't introduce, nonsense security for if there is no risk. So if the risks are telling you that you can continue doing the backup every 24 hours, then it's business as usual. There is no additional effort for that particular activity. On the other hand, if there are high risks, of course, then you will do the backup more often. And it might introduce some, I would say, additional effort, but usually if you do it in an elegant way, it's not too much, okay? So this is basically the way to do it. I would say that you should write the documents that do make sense, that are aligned not only with your business, with your technology, but also with your risks. Okay. Now let's go for this last challenge, implementing the large controls that we do not really thought so far, like disaster recovery. For that purpose, is really the best if you take the know-how from either a consultant or, let's say, a specialized company like us, and take a look at how these documents are already defined, so that you don't lose too much time. So I would say that this is the best approach there. Okay, good. I think these were all the challenges. So let me go for the conclusion, and then I'll answer all of the remaining questions, the Q&A. So I would say, if you plan this whole project properly, and then you actually have a much more, I would say, positive experience with ISO 27001 than you actually expected. So, having this clear plan, having this clear path will definitely help you out, go through this with less pain than you anticipated. And of course, for that purpose, you can use advisor as 𝗂𝗲𝗏𝗀𝗏 and also this company training academy. And we already sent you the links, but also now we'll send you the links to schedule a call with our 𝗂𝗲𝗏𝗏 expert, and he will actually show you how this both of these software work. So he can actually show you anything that you're interested in. But in any case, you can sign up also by yourself to this free trial for both 𝗂𝗲𝗏𝗏 and for this company training academy. Right, now let's move on to the Q&A. So I'll start answering your remaining questions now, but feel free to send your other questions through chat, and I'll gladly answer any of your questions. While you're sending these questions, let me give you a couple of notes. So first of all, feel free to reach out to me directly and ask any questions, and we'll send you now this email so that you can actually use it to communicate and send your questions directly to me. Second, you can follow me on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and there you'll find lots of useful things. So for example, on on LinkedIn, I post regularly most important articles that I find on the internet with the latest news on cybersecurity governance standards, these kind of things. So if you want to be up to date, then you can take a look at my LinkedIn profile. Then on YouTube, you can actually find a series of videos on ISO 27001. So you'll find the videos there, how to do risk management, how to implement controls, how to do this, register of requirements. So all of these things you can actually find on YouTube. So if you want to learn more through this video format, then it's something that might be interesting for you. Also, what you'll find on YouTube is this Secure and Simple podcast. So it's a new podcast that I started a couple of weeks ago. And there actually you'll find some interesting interviews. And one of these interviews is with René Mathiasen. And there actually we discuss how you can use ISO 27001 for, let's say, compliance with the NIS2 requirements, and how ISO 27001 is very useful for the suppliers of NIS2 companies within European Union. So quite an interesting interview. So if you have time, take a look and listen to it. Okay, and another thing is that in my next webinar, next Wednesday, will be on how to use ISO 22301, the business continuity standard, to create business continuity plans for DORA and NIS2. So if you're interested in these EU cybersecurity regulations and how you can use ISO standards for them, then you can sign up for these webinars. And you can sign up on these webinars either on our website or LinkedIn or YouTube. Great, so let's see some questions that came in. So let me see a couple of questions that came in before the webinar. So Liz was asking, are there ways to intersect QMS, meaning Quality Management System, and ISMS per ISO 27001-2022 revision by having shared procedures, processes, and so on? So the answer is yes. So for example, the requirements in 27001 are basically the same as in other ISO standards for document control. So basically this clause clause 7.5. So if you already have your procedure for document record control for some other standard, then you can use exactly the same documents without duplicating it. You simply include the management, your document control of your ISMS in this existing document. Also, what is the same is basically this human resource cycle. So how you actually determine the needs for the training and how you actually send people for training. If you have any kind of a procedure for that purpose, then you can use it also for 27001. Of course, the trainings themselves will be different, but the system on how you actually come up with this training will be the same. What else? Basically, you have the internal audit, so the requirements for the internal audit are the same. Again, if you have the internal audit procedure, you can use this the same. basically these are, you know, generally the things that are almost the same. Risk management is not so similar, so I'm not sure if you can use risk management from one standard to another. So basically, you know, mostly it's about internal audit, about the document control, and these kind of things. Okay, another question came from Sean. How should I renew my certificate? So I assume that you have a personal certificate from a course, and if you want to renew it, so let's say if you got the certificate according to the old 2013 revision, then you should go for this transition course. And we'll share now the link with you you can actually see the transition course on our website, where you can actually renew your certificate for the latest 2022 revision of the standard. Okay, now let's see if what questions came in. Okay. So, question from Marco: do we have a course or a certificate for NIS2? We will publish NIS2 courses, I hope, in April, end of April. Now, actually, we'll publish in basically a week or two. We will publish a series of courses for DORA regulation, so the cybersecurity regulation for financial industry. So, if you're interested in attending these courses for DORA, you will see them hopefully end of next week, and then we'll do the same thing for NIS2, I hope, in April. Now, why didn't we do it for NIS2 earlier? Because we were waiting actually for lots of these additional regulatory technical standards to be published for NIS2, and also for local legislation to be published for NIS2, so that we can include those in the courses. Yeah, and this is something that will come up hopefully in April. Good. Michele is asking, how much does Conformia cost for 500 people organization? So we do not recommend that you go, if you are 500 people, we recommend actually that you not use Conformia. Conformia is basically made for smaller companies of up to 200 employees. But basically, if you go for Conformia, the largest plan costs something like, I think, $260 per month. I'm sorry, but I don't know the exact price, but it's around this amount. So it's roughly, if you pay annually, I think it's around $2,300 or so per year. So this is the highest tier for Conformia. Of course, there are lower tiers, so I think it starts from $140 per month. Good. I think I answered all the questions, and yeah, we are already over the top of the hour. So let me wrap up the webinar. Just a couple of words. So as I mentioned, you know, this 1 hour webinar was, you know, too short really to go into all the details, like, you know, risk management or controls or documentation. And for that purpose, of course, you can take a look of all these articles and other resources that I've shared with you. And yeah, how can we access the presentation deck? So if you joined via LinkedIn or YouTube, we'll publish the PDF presentation deck on the same page where you're watching the webinar now. So what you should do is once the webinar ends, you should, you know, stay on the page maybe for 10 minutes or so, and then you will see in the comment section we will publish links where you can actually download the presentation deck. Now, if you join the webinar through Zoom, then we'll send you an email with the presentation deck in this email, and you'll receive it latest by tomorrow morning. Yeah, and basically this is it. Yeah, we'll also send you our short survey, so I would appreciate if you find time to fill this survey out. It's only 3 questions, so less than a minute for you to fill this out, and it's very useful for us, this kind of survey, this kind of feedback, so that we know what we need to improve in the webinar. And that would be all. Thank you very much, and I hope you have enjoyed this webinar. Have a nice day.